Hi, I'm M.
And my name is Bea.
And this is
Fangirls Anonymous. A quick warning, this podcast is not for kids.
We get into some pretty explicit stuff.
But if you're still with us and into that, welcome.
Hi, Bea.
Hi, M.
How's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
I am fantastic. Today we are talking about histories of online platforms.
And I think a little bit about our personal experiences with them, because it's really hard to talk about them in a way that matters, especially if you plan on using them. I don't know what the kids call it these days. All I really want to say is zeitgeist. I know that's not right.
I call we're kind of kids. Like I call it zeitgeist. Anyway, yeah. I think that it's good to have a base knowledge of not only current platforms, but also past platforms, especially if you're just starting out, which I doubt is a lot of our listeners. But
for those of you who want to know where to go, this is a pretty good set of places to go.
Yeah.
Maybe not Livejournal. Anymore.
We will get to that.
It used to be.
It definitely used to be, especially for Russians. Super fun. Okay, so the first fandom platform or online platform for fandom started out in 1998, and it's called Fanfiction.net.
Might have heard of it.
Yeah, I feel like most people in fandom have definitely heard of it. I got through fanfiction through Tumblr and through my mother, but yeah, Fanfiction.net I feel like is a perfect name for a place of fanfiction. It was founded October 15th, 1998 by a lady called Jing Li. I think that's how I pronounce her name. It's split into 9 categories. So the categories are anime/manga, books, cartoons, miscellaneous, games, comics, movies, plays/musicals, and TV shows. It also has a crossover category that was added in 2009.
If you go on the site, you'll learn pretty quickly that the crossover category is both one of the better things and one of the not great things about the site, because it really is nice to be able to say, hey, I'm looking for something that's these 2 specific fandoms. But on the other hand, you can only pick 2. And some people like to play in more fandoms than that in a single fic. So, or a single work, I should say, because sometimes there's kind of collections of drabbles or smaller fics that all of them are sort of unique, but you want to put them all together so they're easy to access.
There are also fics that have fan works that aren't just fics. It's also like maybe throw in a fan music in there, fan song or fan art.
I don't actually think that there is almost any fan art that isn't the thumbnails.
I'm missing it up with Wattpad.
On fanfiction.net, if you go there, the interface has not changed much, if any, since 1998. Maybe I'm being unkind to it, but it's very simple. You can pick a fandom and you will see every work in that fandom that they currently have on the site. You can organize it by certain categories like word count, how many favorites it has. There are several categories that I can't think of off the top of my head, but ultimately there isn't a ton to it. They have sort of genre classifications for stories that when you post a story you have to put it in one. Things like adventure or drama. Again, pretty simple, not a ton of them. And that is pretty much the extent of what their tagging system is.
Yeah, I will say that it's easy to read because the interface is so simple. Like with lots of words for a fanfic. If it's a really long fanfic, it's easy to read. It's harder to move in between chapters, I found.
There are some other problems as well. Like, I'm not personally super thrilled by their mobile interface on the site. I find it's a little bit too clean. There are some things that I want, like a summary at the top, that I can't get. Fanfiction.net is a really amazing place for a lot of reasons. The way that they have organized their site is not my preference. I know there are a lot of people out there who really do prefer it. They like the simpleness of it. They find it much easier to navigate for however their browsing style is. So it's still incredibly popular. I would say it is one of the top 2 sites that people still use, and it is the oldest major site. So that's kind of impressive.
Yeah, definitely. I have only ever read 2 fics on fanfiction.net. One was a John Locke fic, John and Sherlock from the Sherlock fandom. And it's the only one I've ever read of any John Locke. Not super into that pairing. And then I also read a Destiel fic that was really long. I think it was around 400,000 words. And I didn't end up finishing it because the chaptering system on the online web page on your phone, it doesn't really work. It's hard because you're like, oh, what chapter am I on? I can't remember because it's just a list of numbers on the bottom, especially with that long of a fic.
There are parts of it that I don't enjoy either.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, I have read not a ton, not even the majority of the fic that I've read has been on fanfic, but there are certain fandoms and certain types of works that I find more readily there. I would argue that Gen tends to be more easily found there, as do heterosexual pairings. And also because of its age, if you're looking for something that was written pre-2010, you have a slightly better chance of finding it on fanfiction.net than you would on Ao3.
Yeah, a lot of authors pre-2010 or 2009 just haven't imported their stories over to Ao3 as much as we would like.
I don't mind it being on fanfiction.net because it's a different ecosystem. I feel like it generates different kinds of fics, and it is an archive of a different type of fandom, in a way.
Oh, okay.
Because it is older, and some of the fandoms that really do stretch back, like Harry Potter, have a very different presence on fanfiction.net than they do on Ao3 for a variety of reasons. And it's good, it's bad, it is what it is.
So there is a controversy involving fanfiction.net. There are some controversies involving a few platforms regarding fandom and fanfiction. The site doesn't allow certain types of fic, which is kind of the opposite of Ao3, which we will be talking about later. In 2002, the site disallowed NC-17 content. Before that, there would be a pop-up that would come up when somebody would try to access an NC-17 fic or any type of NC-17 content. But even since 2002, explicit work still exists on the site, and I have read them. So it's kind of weird. It's kind of like Tumblr in that way.
Yeah, if you're looking for something that is explicit, it's the wrong place to go for the most part, unless you have a specific fic that you know has what you want in it, you know where to find it. Part of the downside of the simplicity of the system and the limited tagging is that if you are looking for something specific, then it's a little bit harder to find because there is no tag for that. And you can't keyword search summaries either, unless you are willing to go page by page of results and Control F for what you want. It isn't great. But if you are the sort of person who sort of scattershot reads and you're like, I generally kind of want this today and I'm willing to see what's new or what's long or what has these two specific characters, because you can tag a limited number of characters, but it's difficult to tag them as a pairing. It's a different system than what Ao3 uses. It's not the slash, and it's not used, I would say, as consistently.
I mean, that's probably because it is older. I don't think it is used quite as often as other platforms now, but
it depends on the fandom.
Like Harry Potter, I'm sure, is still quite large on there.
It depends on the pairing, and I would say the age of the author. Fanfiction.net, in my experience, has been a really interesting mix of what I would consider very old, very experienced fandom authors, or authors who started out there, and younger authors. But also, it's older fandom, so you have older writers, and again, different ecosystems, so people looking for different things that maybe they grew up with.
Yeah, totally. I'd recommend going and checking out fanfiction.net if you're interested. I thought it would be kind of neat if we did fun facts about everyone, because I did find some weird fun facts about every platform that I researched. The fun fact for fanfiction.net is the longest fanfiction on the site is The Loud House Revamped, a crossover fanfiction of Loud House, which is over 8,350,000 words long as of February 2021. And I actually looked up what the longest published book is, word-wise, and it's only 1.5 million words. I'm pretty sure it's a autobiography of somebody, but it's
dubious honor.
Yeah, it's 5.5 times longer or something like that. It's crazy. I don't know if that is the longest piece of fiction ever, but it's probably pretty up there, if not the longest piece of fiction. So,
let's talk about Livejournal.
Fun. It's crazy, weird stuff, and not fun in certain instances, but fun to talk about.
So I feel like the two things that we need to start off with Livejournal are, first of all, it's not a fanfiction archive the way that fanfiction.net is. It isn't solely for fanfiction or even primarily for fanfiction. Much like Tumblr, it's a blog hosting site. And two, you're not going to find a lot of fandom presence there anymore. It's pretty dead for some good reasons.
It was established on April 15th, 1999 by American programmer Brad Fitzpatrick. It was originally a website to keep up with his old friends from high school.
So MySpace before MySpace. And it had a lot of elements that made it particularly welcoming to fandom spaces, which previously socially tended to be either on fanfiction.net, which is not the best social platform. Like I said, it's primarily an archive. Or you would get newsletters or like Yahoo groups or AOL chat rooms. Writing and sharing fic was a very different way of doing it. It was more like an email chain, and then you had fanfiction.net, which was an archive, and then you got Livejournal, which is more of a blog. So you had the social aspect of a chat room or Yahoo groups, but you also had the archiving abilities because you could do posts of your fic so that anybody who was zooming through a tag could find your fic and read it if they wanted, provided you didn't lock it.
Yeah, I have actually never visited livejournal.com. I heard a lot about it kind of growing up into the fandom, into fanfiction spaces. I kept hearing it as kind of like a whispered, oh, we don't want to go there. We don't want to talk about livejournal.com. Bad things happened here kind of speak. I would read a lot on Tumblr actually about people losing their fics, losing their work on Livejournal because of international reasons, which is crazy. So the controversy surrounding livejournal.com was that it was originally made by an American, Brad Fitzpatrick, but it was sold to a group in Russia. On Livejournal, a lot of Russians like to conglomerate there, and especially during the early 2000s. Think like 2001, 2002, that kind of time. And they really like to go there to talk to each other about their government and about how they didn't like their government. And when it was sold to a group in Russia, a lot of the Russian people on the site were worried that because it was sold to a group in Russia, the site would crack down on anything regarding like smack talk about their government, right? But luckily, for a long time, that group was like, we're keeping our servers in America, so go ahead, have fun, talk about what you want to talk about, including smack about the government of Russia, right? So then in 2017, the servers were abruptly moved to Russia, and that completely changed. The servers, then the whole website fell under Russian jurisdiction within their laws and under Russian media laws, which essentially ended the whole site as a fandom space because Putin is a terrible human being and is super homophobic, and a lot of fan fiction is explicit and has a lot of queer stuff in it. So those were gone.
And notably, this wasn't we're going to give out a warning that this is going to go away. This was, you woke up one day and it was gone, no warning.
So you didn't even have time to download your fics, because what if the only space you have that fic in was livejournal.com? That happened to people. It was terrible. It made a lot of people decide not to be in fandom anymore because they're like, my art is so ephemeral, somebody could just take it away without me allowing them to, basically. It was a pretty rough time, but it got worse. In 2017, they announced that any blog that got more than 3,000 hits would be under Russian media laws that stated that therefore it is a media site and is under the non-free speech laws. Like, that's how I think of it as an American, but Russia has certain laws that if a blog or if something online or if TV or something like that, if shows have more than 3,000 people, then they can't talk bad about the government. Basically, they can't speak badly about the Russian government, and that was happening with a lot of blogs. They were struck down because they were talking bad about Putin. So I actually have a article from 2017 when this just happened from a site called the History of the Web. In December of 2016, practically overnight and without any word, the Livejournal servers were relocated from California to Russia, which has quite a few far-reaching effects. For instance, Livejournal would now be compelled to hand over data when requested by the state, a request it could refuse and did while in California. Many users understandably feared the worst, and they were right. That same month, Livejournal blogger Alexei Kungurov was sentenced to 2 years in prison for dissenting opinions on Russia's actions in Syria, he wrote in his blog. Others began to notice that some blogs, such as those from pro-Ukrainian writers, were suddenly disappearing. In April of 2017, SUP took things one step further. They released a new terms of service that classified any blog that gets over 3,000 viewers a day as a media outlet, subject to censorship and prosecution. They also allowed the Russian government to pull any content it deemed obscene, which in a Putin-led government means, among other things, any LGBTQ content. The list unfortunately goes on. Many users have jumped ship to other platforms, but that's not necessarily easy for others. The Kremlin clearly intends to turn Livejournal, one of the last open platforms available to Russians, into another state-controlled internet platform, and this appears to be just the beginning. It's a really interesting article. That's only the very end of it, so if you want to, there will be a link in the show notes, but I highly recommend to read it. It's really good. It's titled Whatever Happened to Livejournal.
It's important to note that it's not like Livejournal stopped existing or that all fandom spaces on it just disappeared. My introduction to Livejournal, I think, was very, very different than M's. I was looking for fic, and I was looking for fic that I was recommended as being, you know, sort of broad strokes very good, particularly in the Merlin fandom. So I ended up kind of internet rabbit holing my way into looking for big bangs. And some of the big bangs almost exclusively existed on Livejournal, and the only places you could really have access to some of them or be able to find a link of a link of a link to where the author imported it to Ao3 was to go through these Livejournal accounts. And so I feel like I interacted with the space a little bit more the way that it might have been originally in its heyday. There are parts of it that were really uniquely suited to fandom in a way that I don't think we've got a platform that recreates, because we've got Tumblr, which has the blogging side, and we've got our archives, but Livejournal was, when you went to a fandom blog, it wasn't the way Tumblr is, where it was reblogging GIFs and maybe wrecking a fic here or there with a link or writing short fic. Livejournal was geared towards building these communities of people where you would be friends with all these different people and you would be sharing fic back and forth, and the comment section was really well streamlined to be able to kind of bounce ideas off of or to write sequential fic. So there were parts of it that were really easy and really cultivated this creative energy in the fandom. Unfortunately, because of the way it was built around communities, Livejournal was also really good at being exclusionary if it wanted to, or dredging up problems between fans. It was easy to kind of get the rumor mill going. As the older fans would say, there was a lot of wank. Fandom wank was all over Livejournal.
I will say that the first part, when you're talking about the good stuff of Livejournal, sounded very utopian. Like, that sounds amazing. It's kind of a husk of what it used to be, it sounds like.
Yeah. I have to tell you, my own personal tragedy is something that I have been hard put to find in any other spaces these days, is a good old-fashioned, I would like to find a fic blog those existed in Livejournal, where you could go on and be like, hey, I was looking for X, Y, and Z in this fandom, because they were usually pretty fandom specific. And you would have people commenting and going, oh, it's this fic, here's a link. It's really hard to find those in the same way. You can go on Reddit. There are some Tumblr blogs that are run a little bit differently because the platform is different, but...
I was just about to say that, yeah, I've actually used a Tumblr blog like that. I've been like, hey, I'm remembering this very specific fic that I read, I just can't remember the title of it, and they found it for me, and it was great. But, like, it's not the same way as, hey, I really want a Titanic Dinluke fic. Can you point me the way? But yeah.
So, the fun fact for Livejournal is that there is Frank the Goat, which if you go to Livejournal, you'll probably see at the top of the page. He sometimes has a magnifying glass if the page doesn't exist anymore. Sadly, that it happens a lot. During the early years of the site, Frank was sort of treated as though he were alive. He had a user base, he had a biography on his journal. He was sort of a community mascot, but in the truest sense of sports mascots having lives and families and backstories.
Yeah, he had his own journal, apparently. Like his own blog, basically. Super fun. So, the next one is Wattpad. Wattpad.com. It started in 2006. It is basically a website and app. It's basically unpublished by the old-timey terms of publish, right? Basically ways for people to publish their stories, their novels, kind of.
It's not just for fan fiction, it's also for original fiction.
Yeah, the only thing I've ever read on Wattpad is a basically non-published novel that somebody wrote, YA novel. It was pretty good, I would say, but it was the only thing I've ever read, and I didn't want to read anything else because at the time it was touted as the best one on the site, and I was like, if this is the best one, maybe I don't want to read anything else on here. But I've heard there's some pretty great stuff since. That's been like 6 years now, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna admit that this is also a little bit of a gap in my knowledge as well. Sorry for all of you really dedicated Wattpad users out there. I personally have not had great experiences with either the user interface or the quality of the fic that I find there, so I have never managed to actually finish a fic on the site.
We are great researchers. So it's available in over 50 languages, which is neat, even though 77% of its content is written in English. It has over 90 million users, which I kind of put a question mark next to that because that seems kind of ridiculous. Like, how is that even possible? Like, that's
Maybe
a lot of people.
I mean, they also have original fiction, so a goodly portion of those could also be people looking to read original fiction on the cheap. Because as far as I know, everything on the site is free.
What's funny in the Wikipedia article about Wattpad is that the phrasing is funny. The platform claims to have an audience of more than 90 million users. So even Wikipedia is a little sus about that. But the original slogan was Stories You'll Love until 2019 when it was changed to Where Stories Live.
I'm not sure I find that one is compelling.
Yeah. I don't know why they decided to change that, but it was acquired by the Naver Corporation in 2021 in January. So it might be changing soon. We don't know. I've only ever used it on a phone.
I have only ever used it on a desktop, and I found it confusing. To me, it had the opposite problem of fanfiction.net, where fanfiction.net, I had all story all the time, and not a whole lot of metadata to sort of help me figure out where I was in concerns with the author and the story and so on. Wattpad, I could find the author, the story, the chapter title, the art that the author wanted to put with it. I couldn't actually find the story anywhere.
I remember the thing that I read, it had like art with it, and I thought that was pretty cool. But maybe I tried to read another one and there wasn't any art, and I just wasn't interested, and I had already found Ao3, and I was like, you know what, maybe I don't need to be on this site anymore. But yeah, it's Wattpad is a thing. Go ahead and look around if you are inclined, but I personally think there are better spaces. Fun fact about Wattpad: one of the most notable stories on the platform is the After series by Anna Todd, which was originally published as a Harry Styles fanfiction.
I would say that if you are into bandom, which is band fandoms, Wattpad is probably a good place to start out seeing if you like the authors or the atmosphere of the fandom, because from what I understand, there is a large percentage of fics that are fandom that end up on the site.
It is time. It is time to enter the realm in which M knows a lot about these sites because she actually uses them. Tumblr. If you're in fandom and you don't know about Tumblr, get on that shit, okay? Tumblr is great. Go to Tumblr and use it and find good stuff because it's once you know how to use the site, it's a great way to find stuff about fandom in general. It's actually how I found fan fiction, kind of. Notwithstanding my mother, but yeah, Tumblr is kind of the successor to Livejournal. Do you want to talk about that, Bea?
Sure. So, like we said about Livejournal, it was a blogging platform. So, part of it was that people would create these blogs and would produce content and post it there to share with anybody else on the site. And depending on how you set up the account, with potentially anybody else on the web. Tumblr could be described exactly the same way. At the heart of it, it is a blogging platform. People make an account, they produce content that they put on their blog, and depending on how you set it up, you can potentially share it with anybody in the world. There are some differences. There's a different culture in Tumblr than grew up in Livejournal. Tumblr had a very different broad range user base than I think Livejournal ever did. Livejournal was a huge fandom space, and in some respects, that was all anybody knew it was for. Whereas Tumblr, I feel like, has reached a lot of different other groups. Not to pull up fandom drama from a while ago, but once upon a time there used to be the war between the hipsters and the fandom people on Tumblr. In some respects, it feels like fandom was touching a wider circle by using Tumblr, so they got to sort of absorb different bits from other places that they didn't necessarily get on Livejournal, but also the construction of the platform itself ended up restricting or enhancing other parts. For example, the way comments worked in Livejournal was very, very different than how they work in Tumblr, both just visually how you see them and also how people created threads. I will admit that I don't understand the nitty gritty of Tumblr very well, but just eyeballing it and how you read it and the way people used it to communicate, it reads completely differently on the two sites, which generated different content in a really interesting way. All of that aside, I would argue that Tumblr is the closest blogging platform that we still presently have to what Livejournal was.
Are you not a Tumblr user?
I am, but passively.
Oh, okay. I'm there every day. So I will say that it's a great site if you can find the people that you want to follow and see all of their posts. There is this weird thing with online where a lot of the jokes that exist on Tumblr get disseminated to other sites, and those are the jokes that those sites use. We're kind of like the breeding ground of humor a little bit when it comes to oddball humor of the internet. At least that's what we like to consider ourselves as. It was originally founded by David Karp in 2007 and now owned by Automatic. It lost Verizon like billions of dollars. Verizon bought it for like $3 billion and then sold it for like $3 million to Automatic in a couple of years ago, I think now. And everybody on the site celebrated that we made Verizon lose 2.7 billion. No, 2.700. I don't know math.
Quite a bit of money.
Quite a bit of money. We really definitely celebrated that we made Verizon lose a bunch of money. It was great. But we all still love going on it, even though we call it a really terrible site to be on. I'm not selling it right. It's a great site. Go on it if you want to. But it has a lot of fan fiction on it and a lot of fan art. I would say that if you want fan art of a specific pairing, it is very easy to go on Tumblr and look up that pairing's name, and you will find great fan art. Actually, just great art in general. There's great stuff on Tumblr.
I enjoy what fic I have found there, but it's harder for me to find longer works there to read because the way in which you are able to connect chaptered posts is, at least the way I've seen it been used, a little bit hinky. You have to be fairly fastidious about linking or archiving as a master post for people to find, and otherwise it's scrolling through pages and pages and pages, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I have certain blogs that I love where I just like to scroll through pages and pages of their stuff, but sometimes if I'm looking for something specific, it's a little bit harder.
Oh my god, it is not a site to look for anything specific. Bea will attest to that. I was trying to find a specific post on Tumblr and I could not find it. I still can't find it and I'm so sad.
Would you argue that, kind of like fanfiction.net, if you are a scattershot reader who is just in a mood, that it's a much better platform for you?
Yeah, and I think maybe the site can form your specific wants as well, because I basically grew up with Tumblr when it came to my fandomness. And I maybe would consider myself a scattershot reader. I get into this mood of a pairing and then I don't care what fic Tumblr throws at me as long as it's that pairing. But yeah, if you are looking for anything specific within a fandom, it is really tough unless you know exactly the wording of that specific post or exactly the wording of the title. You know, even then it's a little bit tough. And that's why AO3 exists, which we'll talk about later, but still.
Because their tagging system tends to be extremely user specific, you get really interesting cultural notes like having funny jokes in the tags, but on the other hand, I have had artists specifically that I love, that I try to find a specific work that I know is X character and X character, and I end up having to scroll through 40 pages of their blog and finally find out that they just hadn't tagged it that. They tagged it something extremely unique that I never would have thought of.
So the problem with the tagging system on Tumblr is that it's almost a way to comment about the post that you're reading, as opposed to making, because the tags go along with every post that you see on Tumblr, it's a way for people on Tumblr to talk about the post as opposed to making a clarified, streamlined tagging system for their followers, because nobody gets famous off of Tumblr. Everybody is completely anonymous and doesn't...
Well, they're as anonymous as they want to be.
True. But nobody gets famous. Nobody knows the amount of followers that you have on Tumblr. So if you have 1 million followers, nobody knows except for you. Unless you want to tout it to everybody. But that's a little passé on Tumblr, I'd say. It's a space for people to just be super creative with each other, but that does not make it a very good tagging system, which is the exact opposite of AO3. AO3 is the best tag system of probably the entire internet, in my opinion, but Tumblr is the opposite of that. But it's a great way to immerse yourself into a specific fandom. It was a great way for me to immerse myself into Stucky, or the MCU in general.
I have to tell you, my favorite thing about Tumblr that I feel like cannot be matched by any other fan platform right now is their fan art. And unfortunately, yes, I include DeviantArt in that, because DeviantArt, if you've ever been there, is massive and amazing and has so many other things going on other than fandom.
And full of furries.
Yes, well, in Tumblr, I can type in whatever fandom I'm looking for and immediately find fan art of it, and it's a little bit more complicated on DeviantArt. So,
yeah, scattershot is kind of the best word to describe anything regarding Tumblr, in my opinion. It's such an ecosystem unto itself that it's really hard to find anything specific. But if you want to immerse yourself into a specific fandom, go ahead. It is great. High recommend. Fun fact?
So Tumblr has the somewhat dubious honor of being the first platform to host a then current US president, namely Barack Obama, had a Tumblr.
I think that's my favorite fun fact of all of these.
I have to ask though, do you think he actually ran it, or was it one of
Fuck
his PR
no.
people? Because on
it
the
was
other hand,
absolutely a White House, what are they called?
press representative?
No. Sure. A little man or lady was just sitting there pretending to be Obama behind a computer on Tumblr.
almost funnier.
I love that so much. Okay, Ao3.org.
This one is the big one.
The best one.
I feel like I cannot put a qualitative measure
can.
on these because I'm gonna offend somebody, and you know what? All of these platforms have their own charms. You just have to understand what you want from them and not be frustrated when they can't do something.
You're always right, Bea. But like in my heart of hearts, I know that this is the platform that I have most experience with, and I'm totally biased, okay? But as somebody who was just starting out with fandom, trying to find fic and trying to figure out what this whole fandom thing was, Ao3.org was just kind of the light in a very dark tunnel for me. I was able to just read fanfic without having to worry about anything else. Nothing else extraneous, you know? It is truly awesome. Anyway, Ao3.org stands for Archive of Our Own, or AO to the Third Power. So the site's name was actually derived from a blog post by the writer Naomi Novik. She called it an archive of one's own. The original name by Naomi Novik was actually inspired by the essay A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. AO3 was actually originally called a site called FanLib, which monetized or tried to monetize fanfiction. Amazon actually did something similar to that for a couple years. Didn't work out very well because what's great about fanfiction is that you don't need to pay for it. And it also didn't really work out for FanLib, mostly because the public didn't like that it was a website that was created by all men. A lot of the fandom space is creatively like made by women, or not men, like people on the gender non-binary spectrum and all that stuff. There's some men involved too, but having all men make a fanfiction site that is monetized didn't really sit well with the fandom space. So it was actually turned or developed into Archive of Our Own.
So the reason that AO3 is quite popular is because, like fanfiction.net, it is an archive of just fanfiction that is free, and it's almost entirely openly accessible to anybody who has internet access. But unlike fanfiction.net, it allows explicit content, and where fanfiction.net is older, AO3 is, well, not new, certainly more recent. I feel like in some ways, internet fandoms in general matured in their culture and sort of ironed out what they wanted and how they wanted it. And AO3 is a little bit more a product of that more mature culture, whereas fanfiction.net was this very first thing that we've ever seen of this kind, sort of. And it's still really popular because it still works and it still fills that need. But AO3 sort of does it differently, and I feel like sometimes what I see other people experience in fandom is they started places like Wattpad or fanfiction.net or Livejournal, and then they sort of matured into a place like AO3 because AO3 is complicated in a good way. AO3 has a lot of bells and whistles, which can be really, really nice for your fic reading experience in terms of finding it and reading it and filtering through it. For example, the tagging system. You have the ability to tag as many fandoms as you want. You can tag as many relationships as you want of whatever kinds you want. And then you have a whole host of other freeform tags that you can do. So if you're doing an AU where your characters are firefighters, you just tag it Firefighter AU. And if you want to read it, you just look up that tag. So it makes it really simple as a reader to say, hey, I want to read this. Hey, I don't want to read this. And also, I'm looking for, in general today, this weirdly specific fic where everybody's penguins. I don't know.
And this is all because of the wonderful volunteers that volunteer for AO3 called tag wranglers. Tag wranglers are people who make sure that all of the tags that are slightly different from one another, but basically end up being the same concept, all get siphoned down into one tag.
Or put under an umbrella tag. They don't actually change the tags. They all get put under an umbrella.
So it's super easy once you get the hang of the website itself, which I find that that's kind of every website. You kind of have to figure out how to move around a website anyway. Once you get the hang of AO3, it's so easy to find a specific fic that you want, as opposed to Tumblr.
Or even to filter
find
by
a
a certain
tag.
criteria. One of the things I like to do is if I'm just in a mood and I'm like, I want to read something in this fandom for something, is I'll go and I'll arrange all of the fics in that fandom by kudos, because that's their
My
system
favorite
of
thing.
kudos is their system of the nearest equivalent would probably be likes on Facebook, but it's different than that. Basically, if you thought it was really good, you can give them a kudos. It means glory. So it's basically, I thought this was really good. And so you can arrange it by the number of kudos a fic has. So the number of people basically who read it and went, I really liked that.
Sorry, quick little aside here with kudos. I know that when you press kudos for a fic and then you try and press kudos again for that fic, it says that you've already left kudos here. And basically saying, don't press kudos again. If you want to, you can keep pressing that button, and all of those clicks, the numbers of those clicks, will be sent to the author. The author knows that you clicked kudos like 25 times, okay? So, like, if you want to, it still gets sent to the author, even though it doesn't look like it does. Just fun little factoid there I wanted people to hear.
Kudos is a great way to organize a group of fics in a fandom, just because you can see what other people liked. I like to organize it by that, just to be like, okay, here's what people thought was good in general. Because in big fandoms, usually the top kudos is in the thousands or tens of thousands of kudos. So a lot of people thought it was good. And then I can start scrolling through. I can skip to page 9 because I've already seen the first 5 pages or something. And then I can scroll through and go, hey, I'm not really feeling this pairing today. And I can go over to the sidebar and I can exclude it and pull up results and start looking again. And it's really easy to sort of tweak what you want. There's, to a certain extent, the ability to do some basic searching things. So if you knew that it involved ginormous talking vegetables in the summary, to a certain extent you can search that. That one's a little bit harder to play with, so maybe not for your first run. There's some other easier things you can do. But
I will say that for somebody who is very particular like me, when regarding pairings, like I basically have an OTP within every fandom, and I don't walk out of that OTP because it's an OTP for me for a reason. But what's great about AO3, because of my particularness, is I can just go in there and only ever find fics that are only that pairing. For me, that just takes away a lot of the, oh, that's not a pairing, oh, that's not a pairing, oh, that's not a pairing. It streamlines everything, and it gives me the fics that I know that I have a chance of actually loving.
Now, the downside to this is, like Em said, there is a learning curve involved.
Yeah.
Very few people jump into the archive and go, oh, this makes sense. Let me just go and find what I want, however I want. The first couple of months I ever used AO3, I didn't ever change the metadata by which I was organizing all of the fics in a fandom. So I literally would look at just whatever was published recently. It's not a great way to do it unless you're in a very, very small fandom and you've literally read everything and you just need whatever was written yesterday.
Yeah, that is true. It's kind of sad when you're looking through all of the different like TV shows or movies or genres of the fandom, and you only see like 3 fics, and you're like, oh god, the poor people in that fandom, they only have 3 fics on AO3. That's so sad. And also, good for you, fic authors, for that specific fandom. You are the true MVPs. My goodness.
There was another fandom podcast that I listened to that coined a really excellent term for that point where you're looking for anything and it's fishbowling, where you just got your little paws stuck in the fishbowl trying to see if maybe there's another one because you ate all the fish like a cat. So
I like that. I like that term.
Anyway, AO3 is massive. It is the other one of the 2 major fandom platforms that I think most people would be familiar with. It's got a huge devoted following, and of all the fandom platforms that I have ever seen people discuss, it's fanfiction.net and AO3. There are some people who really like one versus the other. I personally am an AO3 person. I find it easier to find high quality fics. I find it easier to find longer fics. And since I am more and less indifferent to smut, it's nice to have what I feel are a little bit more rounded stories, where they more blatantly approach the entirely human condition of sexuality and all that therein.
It's not just lemons.
It's not just fade to black either.
No, it isn't. It does have 3.3 million users, though. It also won the Hugo Award for Best Related Work in 2019, which means that every single person who has ever uploaded a fic or baited the fic, edited any fic, or has done any work involving fan art or anything that is on the website is in part a Hugo Award winner, which is really neat. So both of us are in part Hugo Award winners. We should say Hugo Award winning podcast. B, do you have anything else to say about AO3?
Oh, my favorite thing about AO3, and this is a personal preference, I, despite what it seems like, don't have terribly reliable internet, and or I am in places where I cannot readily get internet. So my preference for most fic that I want to read is to download it onto a phone or my computer. So AO3 has this wonderful, wonderful feature that almost no other platform has, where it lets you download fics as ebooks, and I love it, and I wish every platform had this. So if there is one thing that, in my opinion, sets AO3 apart from every other site, it is definitely their ability to produce ebooks.
That's awesome. I haven't done that before, but that does sound really neat. Fun fact for AO3. On February 29th, 2020, AO3 was blocked in mainland China. So if you're going to be blocked by anybody because of your website, I'd say it's kind of a badge of honor to be blocked by mainland China. No shade against any Chinese people, obviously, but not super into government Chinese politics.
There's a certain degree of internet censorship going on that is slightly funny, but also saddening.
Yeah, fascism is super fun. Okay, so Rec Corner?
Rec Corner.
Rec Corner. Do you want to go first?
Let's have you go first this week.
Ooh, okay, fun. So I have a fic. It's a Din Luke fic. It's actually a Din Luke lawyer fic. Din Luke is Din Djarin, or the Mandalorian, and Luke Skywalker. And I have been in Din Luke hell for like months, and I'm getting real comfy. Okay, the fic is called Good Idea by spqr. Let me just read you the summary. At 1:18 a.m., just when Luke is starting to think he might have gotten away with something, Biggs Darklighter shows up on the other side of his desk and says, "I can't believe you called in sick to get shotgun married to a Mando." This is an AU. It's really cute. It is about Luke, who's a lawyer, and basically he's trying to help out Din with his kid, who was unlawfully taken away by CPS, and it's very adorable. Obviously, Din isn't a terrible father, he's a great dad, but read it. I would say it's a good AU, especially regarding the fact that the Din Luke fandom, the Din Luke fanfiction verse, is pretty small right now, especially since it's been only like 2 or 3 months since, or 4 months since people started shipping them. I think that it almost feels like these people were just waiting to get their hands on this pairing to make Din Luke fanfiction. It's great. If you are interested in Din Luke at all, go and look on AO3 at the tag. It's great.
So my two recs are, I decided to branch out a little bit. A lot of what I am going to rec is just AO3 because that is the bulk of what I read. The first one is, it's called Intemperance by Basingstoke, and it is a Sherlock fic, but not Sherlock the TV show, Sherlock the original Conan Doyle, set in the 1880s, 90s, and 1910s. And the premise of this is that Sherlock is not a cisgendered man. It's left slightly ambiguous, but I would classify him as a trans man. Being the 19th century, he doesn't have access to any real kinds of transitions, and he sometimes goes out and has himself a time on the town, and he ends up pregnant. So it's this strange little story about him having this baby and giving it to the Watsons. It's weirdly heartfelt, and if you have a hankering for a little bit off the wall, sort of interesting take on a non-cis Sherlock, it's a good story. The second one is probably a little bit less squicky to people. It's called Becoming Lífþrasir, and it's by Midoriko-sama, and it is a How to Train Your Dragon fic. The premise of it is, what if instead of going and confronting his father and trying to teach him about dragons in the first How to Train Your Dragon movie, Hiccup actually had run away and just disappeared from Burke. So it takes that and it says, okay, well, Burke is still obviously going to have problems. What's going to happen down the line when he goes out to this Viking archipelago and has his own adventures and grows up and then comes back? It has a lot of fun characters that, if you are not familiar with the TV series that went with the movies, are a little bit, wow, where did those come from? But it is easy to read only knowing the first movie. It's cute, it's funny. So I guess that's all.
Yep.
We will see you next week
on Fangirls Anonymous. Bye!